Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we are going to take apart and sharpen up the old Factor B3 from Winterblade Co. I got this from Ryan to do a review on. This has been a fantastic knife and consistently is among my absolute top 3 all-time knives. There's so many reasons. I did a full-blown review on this. You're welcome to go watch that. But here's the purpose of where I'm trying to get to with this right now. First of all, I've been using it, obviously, for a good while, so it needs a little bit of a sharpening. I noticed that the blade angle, the grind angle, is probably a little higher than what I would like. I'm going to guess, and we'll measure this out on the work sharp, that it's probably a 22 to 24 degree. Most factories like to use that slightly higher angle because it leads to less chipping and damage to the blade itself. Nice consistent grind, everything's good, but I wanted to clean it up, and I figure while I've got it apart, I might as well go ahead and sharpen that blade up. I think I'll knock it down to about an 18 degree on this one, so we're going to go through all of that here today. Just I thought I would share with you also the kind of the disassembly. There are certainly videos about this online that you can go find if you dig around. And ultimately, what I want to get to is some cut testing. So we know this is obviously a real M390 blade. We've done a couple of other recent tests now with other M390s that we were less certain about. Felt like an M390, so I want to put this into the mix as well and get some feedback and verification on how well we see this one perform relative to the other 390s that we've been testing here lately. This one can be a little bit tricky to disassemble because of all the magnets inside, so I thought I would do a video of the disassembly process of it as well. So we'll start with this clip screw here. Only this outside back one needs to be loosened up. It is now loose in there. And then we'll take off the pivot and these 2 screws at the top. For the pivot, I like to use just a nickel, actually. Works really well. That steel is generally softer than the steel of the pivot screw, so that's not going to do any damage to our pivot screw here. So the trick is setting all these pieces far enough apart so that they don't all magnetize and jump to each other. So we'll put our screws up here at the top. Actually, I'll put them up here in this little tray because that's what this mat is really for. So these are our top 2 screws there, pivot screw. Okay, so now this knife is now disassembled. I use a little cloth, just a microfiber here. Oh, there goes my pocket clip screw. Just so that it doesn't, I mean, this is a rubber tray anyhow. Leave the knife closed. If you heard that, it just clicked because one of the magnets has now jumped out of place. So obviously this is titanium, both front and back. This is where it gets to be a little tricky. So this magnet has flipped over, and the reason I know it has flipped over is because I've already been in here. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll take a fine Sharpie pen and number each of the magnets in order so that I know where they go and where to put them back. But there's another magnet underneath here. And so typically, as soon as you pop that top off, this number 1 magnet that fits right there is supposed to stay there will jump over, because right next to it, underneath this liner, we're going to see the other magnet for the pull tab. So I put a number on them, so I know this is obviously the top side. I put the numbering on the top of the magnet. Now you just got to literally lift these off, and these are really tough magnets. Put them far away from each other. So I'm going to put my number 1 out there. I'm going to put my number 2 up here. And then this also is a magnet. Now, I want you to note the shape. That's just a little rubber stopper that holds the blade from banging in. We'll just set that up there for right now. I should point out this. So notice in the top scale that I took off has that teardrop shape to match the teardrop shape here. So what you're doing is you're pointing this teardrop towards the number 2 magnet. That's how it's going to fit back into the cutout on the top scale here. So I'm going to move my top scale out of the way, and I can now pop this out. This is also a magnet. You can see there's a magnet underneath there. I don't really need to number it because there's only one teardrop shaped magnet. So I'm going to set that over here in its own little pocket. you got to be careful with the magnets, because if you get them too close together, these are strong magnets. They will jump together and they can literally break each other. They're strong, but they're brittle enough, they're hard enough that if they smash together with the force of the magnetism in those magnets, it can actually crack and break those steel magnets. So now we want to just kind of pry off this little carbon fiber lining here. There's nothing should jump around underneath here yet. So we'll spin that and lift that up out of the way. So one of the things that I want to do is apply some lubricant. So in looking at Brian's instructions, he has recommended this specific powder. You can get this on Amazon. I'll put a link down below here. This is a powdered lubricant. So instead of using oil, this is the pull tab here that you slide back and forth to lock and unlock the knife. There's a magnet in there as well. That is sliding along the inside of this carbon fiber liner. And so his recommendation is, instead of using an oil-based lubricant on there, use this dry powdered lubricant. Looks like white powdery substance. You can kind of see it around the top of the bottle there. And it comes with this little pink applicator brush I've got up here. So when we go to put it all back together, then I'll show you putting it back together and using a little bit of that lubricant in there, which I think is a brilliant move, so that you're not oiling it up and then any gunk begins to build up and causes friction that would damage your liner here over time. This lock bar tab just pulls up. You can see it has another magnet inside of it. So I'm just going to set all this to the side for the moment. Obviously, when you are sharpening this knife, you don't want to sharpen the blade with it still attached inside the knife, right? So also note how the bearings are sitting here in the pocket. I thought about, I might add skiffs at some point in time. These are pretty decent ceramic bearings. You can see the open face is facing away from the blade so that when you reinstall it, you get these bearings. But the action on this thing has been incredibly good. It's like, I don't even know why I would want to spend the money to put skiffs in this knife, as good as it has performed. I'm just going to set this one on top of that one, actually. You can obviously pull this out as well. This is that lock tab bar that you slide with your thumb to lock and unlock the knife, or at least to unlock it. And it's got another magnet inside. So again, be careful setting these down around each other. I'm not sure if I actually finished my thought. You don't ever want to sharpen this blade while it's inside the knife, because you have all these magnets in there and you're shaving off metal filings, fine metal powdered dust, steel dust. Where do you think that dust is going to go? It's going to get sucked right into the magnets in here, and that's the last thing you want, is a whole bunch of steel shavings inside of your pocket knife that are stuck on all these different magnets, right? So in order to sharpen this thing, we obviously need to take it out. That will also make it a little bit easier to access everything, just flipping it around and whatnot. So there we go. We have now disassembled our knife. I'm going to take all this stuff, put it away somewhere where it's covered up and no metal shavings can get anywhere near all these magnets. So I'll be back in a couple of minutes here and we will get to sharpening. Okay, before we go back to the overhead view here, I want to give you kind of this close-up look at what I've done with the Sharpie to basically mark the edge of this blade. This is a kind of delicate thing, and you almost can't see it because it just looks like the shadow, but the entire sharpened bevel all the way across here has been, I just took a Sharpie and sharpened it all the way across. Let me see if I can do this job one-handed and spin it around. And so I've done this on both sides, and this is how I'm going to measure the angle on here. So I will move back to the above view and show you how I'll measure out what is this currently, what's the angle on it at the moment. But you can see, hopefully here, that Sharpie is just coating the entire length of the ground edge of this blade on both sides. Now let's go back to the overhead view, and I'll show you how we measure it. All right, so I have my 800, which is my highest stone in this system. I've already set the angle finder on the table and zeroed it out. So we've calibrated our angle finder. I'm going to lay this with the stone on here and measure my angle. I like to start around a 22 just to see. I'm going to take a few passes. You could do this with a ceramic stone as well, but I wanted to go ahead and do the 800. That's a little bit faster. So I'm just going to take a few swipes with the blade, and then we're going to get up close and see what are we cutting, where did we grind this away at. So let's see if I can, wonder, will this zoom in close enough? Almost. So what I can see is that this is getting the top side of the bevel, but not quite all the way down to the very edge. Now I could maybe keep going and grinding, but it's probably just a little bit more than a 22. Let's go ahead, before I move the angle again, let's try the other side, and let's see, the other side is still all black. So let's zoom back out. Let's try a few passes with the 22 degree on this. And see what that side looks like. So this side looks a little bit more even. Let me see if I can zoom us back in. So this is how you measure using the angle. So this one you can see is right at a 22. So they basically sharpened this to probably a 22 degree. That's a safe bet. You can see there's just a touch of black, very tiny amount left right at my fingertips there, but that actually, this side looks pretty consistently like a 22. So I'm wondering, let's go back over to this side, take a few more passes. Doesn't really matter because I'm going to be reprofiling, so you don't have to have a certain scratch pattern while you're doing your test, assuming you're going to be reprofiling. So let's pick that back up again. Sorry, I didn't zoom out on that. So I'm going to say, yeah, this is probably a 22, maybe 23, because you can see there is a little bit of a black left there. So maybe 22.5, but probably what they did was intend to grind this at a 22 degrees. So we'll call it a 22 at that. That's close enough for our work here. And now I know, okay, this knife came to me with a 22 degree edge. So now let's swap out the stones, and I'll repaint the blade here, get the edge of it, and we'll knock it down to, I think I'm going to go to an 18 degree, make this thing ultra slicey. That will obviously leave you with a more fragile edge. So like if you thought you might be using this knife for a hard use knife, maybe you only want to go to 20 degrees. The more wide, so this would be, let's say, a 16 and then an 18 and a 20, 22, 24. Obviously that's really exaggerated, but the more higher angle you leave it at, the less damage you're going to do to that edge when it runs into some hard materials. But, you know, I'm going to put this thing to its paces. This to me is an EDC slicey knife. It's a nice, thin, full, flat grind. I'm going to put an 18 degree on it. Man, there's people out there who will put a 15 degree on their knife and make it really slicey. I don't want to go that far. I think 18 is a nice balance for a really slicey grind knife. So let me repaint the blade. We'll get back down to our low grit stone, and we'll get to sharpening. Okay, so I have obviously moved us back down to an 18 degree, which is where we want to reprofile our blade. I have swapped out to the 220 stone, and we're just going to do some nice, easy passes, making sure that we get all of that Sharpie marked, knocked off of there. It's going to start, obviously, on the top side of the bevel, because this is a lower angle grind, so it's going to start grinding away at the top side until we eventually reach that ultimate edge there. So let's get started. We'll tell you one of the tips that I learned from 𝗍𝗓𝗄s is that if you have to put a little extra effort into one side or the other of your blade edge, that you can do that if you're going to grind a few times like this. Just make sure you work it back in a few times. You don't want to focus too much exclusively without working it, kind of feather it back into the rest of the blade. So that's what I've been doing up here at the tip. I think we're getting about done now. I think we've kind of made it all the way down to the apex, but I'm going to give it a little bit more love. This, again, now we've got a real M390 and our lowest grit. We're really taking away the maximum amount of material to reprofile that edge down. So I have to do a little more work on this first stone than what we would do on the rest of the stones. All right, I think I'm good with that. I'm not really happy that this edge appears to be a little uneven. I'm now feeling for the burr. I can definitely feel the burr up here, although this is a thinner grind. Let's see if I can get that up a little closer here. So hard to see at this angle. It's a little thinner up here, the height of this grind, than it is down here. But I actually don't really have much of a burr. I have just a little tiny bit. I'd like to have a little more burr down here at the bottom, and then it starts to thicken up. I can definitely feel a nice thick burr up here at the top. So we've made it all the way around to the edge, obviously, and we've started to put the burr on the bottom. I can definitely feel a little bit here, but I want to give just a little more love down here at the bottom. I think just a little bit more on this this first one. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Let's get back here. There we go. All right, a little bit more here. Let's see what we can do. All right, I think I'm gonna call it enough on this side. I definitely have a burr here that is going. I don't want to just keep taking off steel unnecessarily. I'm not going to get this top edge any thinner. Let's see if you can barely see that at the bottom of the screen. Still a little thin up here. Nothing I can do about that. It may just take 2 or 3 sharpings after you've reprofiled it to get the steel all worn down to a nice even burr. Or an even depth on that edge there. So let's go ahead and flip it over. By the way, I didn't mention, but it's worth mentioning, I do have a little table that comes with this device. That's one of the bonuses of the Pro system, is that this little table slides on here and it holds the bottom of the blade holder so that you don't have up and down wobble. It's very stiff like that. All right, so I haven't done anything on this side at all, so we got a little work to do here. Let's get on it. Yeah. Don't roll the edge like that. That's a mistake. Rookies. Bunch of rookies. All right, let's take a look to see how we're doing there. I definitely feel we have rolled the burr over consistently. It's not quite as thick down here. I can just barely feel a little burr on this edge, so we definitely need more work back here. And I can also see that the grind line is thinner down here, so let's work a little more on the back. All right, let's see if we're getting that burr. Just barely. It's not quite there yet. We need a little bit more work back here. All right, let's see. Definite strong burr all the way back. That back end is just right back here. It's maybe a micro burr, but I really would like to have a little bit more. And you can see how after I focus on this back edge, then I'll work it all the way back in up the rest of the blade as well. I think I'm going to call it quits on that because I now have enough of a burr. There's definitely a burr there. So I think what we need to do is clean up a little bit, switch out to the next stone, and we'll keep on moving on. Okay, so now we're down to up to our 320, which is, I'm just going through the regular progression of stones. I may just skip through all the rest of these till we get to the stropping point so you can see. I think you get the idea now. At this point, I want to try to be careful about following that scratch pattern that I want in it, which is up and then back this way. So I want the grind lines to point towards the back of the blade, right? That's what this motion up and back like this gives you. So I want to have that consistent for my next several stones till we get all the way up to the ceramic. So let's go ahead and just keep on working through our stones now. And we'll rotate it over. All right, good. So that's one. Yeah. All right. You can hear it come off on that first pass. This first scraping pass, you can literally hear the edge of that burr coming off. I'm going to bring it down like that. That may be less likely to rip the burr off and cause micro tears. But then, after that initial pass, we'll definitely need to go after it a little bit here. Inside the tube. For sure. All right. Let's do the same thing. Start in this direction just to knock that burr off. Hey, this thing's going to dig on like that. So use very light pressure. The burr off with this 800. One pass. Just one pass. I lied. I'm going to do 2 passes. That just knocks the edge of that burr off without putting too much back on the bottom side. I can feel it kind of already did a little bit. All right, that's fine though. That's good. We're all still good. No worries there. All right, grab the ceramic. It's where we have a little bit of a burr from the last time. All right, same thing. Very light touch with this. It's really not being that micro edge, just the micro bevel at the very, very apex tip of this blade. So I'm not trying to take off any material, just trying to hone that fine micro edge of the tip. You still might feel a little bit of a burr. Yeah, perfect. That is such a fine edge burr on there. That's exactly where we want it to be. All right, last pass. Again, I always like to start in that direction. But now we're just giving it a light touch polish. Okay, flip it over and knock off the other edge now. Oh, you can just barely hear that crispy edge popping off this knife. All right. Okay, so we have now polished all the way through 800 grit and through the ceramic stone. I am now ready to take this thing off. I need to reassemble the knife and then give it a good stropping. So we're going to do all that. Let me get the blade out of here before I even get to stropping. And I know there's a little micro burr on this, even from the ceramic stone. Let's just see. Okay, that's not bad. Yeah, I like that. I think once we strop this thing up, we'll be golden. So let's switch back to the workbench and put it back together and strop it up and see what we got. All right, so now it's time to put this thing back together. We're going to use some of this PTFE powder, which I have never used before. That's interesting, but that's what Brian recommends. I am still going to put a little bit of lubricant on the bearings. Obviously, that's always a good idea, but you want to be real careful, especially with this knife. You don't want to have like a very oily knife. You don't want stuff sticking to it and getting in the action, especially if you get metal shavings, which, by the way, make sure you wash your hands really well before you start putting this back together, especially after you're done with all the knife sharpening. You're going to end up with fine metal shavings all over your fingers. You start picking up those magnets, you're going to be, sticking steel to the magnets. All right, so I put just a little bit on that side there. Let's take our blade. There's obviously no detent ball. I could probably wipe out the inside of that little pocket just a little bit better. Make sure that's really good. There's no gunk in the bearing pockets there. Again, I've wiped down the blade already pretty well, but I'm going to give it another fine wipe down, which I'm doing off camera there. All right, that is going to swing back in on this side right here. So they do want to put it together with the blade closed. That is Brian's recommendation. However, before I do that, well, let's just finish with the bearings. Let's go ahead and put some juice into this bearing as well. So I'm just really lubricating it up nicely in my hand. I'm not adding any additional drops. Usually I will add some additional drops to the bearing once I put it into that pocket, but for this knife, no go, because I'm going to be using some powder. So one of the things that we need to do is to, and remember this is magnetized also, and it also tends to pick up the washer which is what sits on top of those bearings there, and that basically fits into the top side pocket. This is a magnet, and it goes button side down, but it has to slide along in this groove right here. I guess I could, let's see if I can do this. Look at that. It has to ride along inside this groove. So I'm going to get a little of this PTFE powder. That's where he says to use it. You can see there's obviously, must be some, feels like already on the edge of this thing, although I didn't put any on there. It looks like a light dusty powder. So I'm just going to dip it in there, knock it off, and you can see paint a little bit around the edges of that. So I'm just going to kind of spread that around. And I'm going to put some on the back side too, but I'm just going to lightly dust up. And Brian says, man, a little dab will do you. Like a little of this goes a long way. But, you know, if a little's good, maybe a lot's great, right? Isn't that how we all do it? I'm gonna also put some on top of this thing, and I'm applying that, what I'm gonna call liberally, although you can probably see that's not really a ton, but in that part of the, let's stick this up here. Look, there's a little hole, perfectly make that stand into. Oh, you can't see that, can you? This top side of that button has to slide along the inside of this here. So you can actually almost see, let me see if I can get that to focus, where it's a little bit darker. So you know what, I may take, because I know what's going on here, and put a little bit of this PTFE on this side of the scale as well, around where that lock button is going to be sliding. You see that? Even picked up some dirt, so I probably didn't do a good enough job cleaning this off to begin with. So before I go even farther, I'm just going to go ahead, I got my rag here, and I'm going to wipe this down even better to really get all the gunk I can. This is a very rough side, by the way. So this side is polished very well. Sorry, can't focus. And this side, where it actually slides along, is pretty rough. This is not a polished side, but make sure it is dry. You certainly don't want any moisture on there. And then let's do a little bit more painting of this piece here. So you can see I just want a very light dusting. I'm just tapping it all on there. Super light coating, you know, although if a little's a good bit, maybe a lot's even better, right? Let's put some even more on there. Because that's rough, that makes me a little nervous. So I'm just going to dab a little bit more on there. Good. All right. I don't know if this is poison. Probably is, because it's a polytetrafluoroethylene. How about that? Superior friction fighting, non-staining, doesn't cake up like graphite, great for lock, spike components, musical instruments, and pocket knives. I made that part up. All right, you can see my goal here, though. You can see where I'm going with that. And that's what keeps happening. And now I'm going to end up with, I got to take this back out. So that's the joy of working with magnets, is that it's just not going to cooperate. It's going to stick to whatever it can stick to. And now I've knocked all my PTFE off of the top side of this lock. That's why I put it on this side as well. Okay, so I'm going to have to try to hold that in place. I see. I definitely need to get this piece back on, and this is where the magnets start giving you all kinds of grief. So let's take and put this on first. By the way, this steel part is part of the bell, the ting sound. I've done all kinds of testing on this. If you put your finger somehow on top of this metal piece, when you flick that knife, it will not make the same ting sound. You will definitely notice a difference. All right, so I got to get my button down there. I got to get this washer to stay here, and everybody play nice for me while I put these, this little piece here back into place. Now I got to look around and say, gosh, did I forget any pieces yet? Nope, haven't forgotten anything yet. Not yet. Okay, so remember, we numbered our magnets, right? So one of the easier ones to put in is going to be this teardrop. And remember, the teardrop has to fit into that pocket and point down towards the number 2 magnet, which will go right here. And now you can see that lock bar sucks right on to number 2. There's a little tiny groove pocket for that to fit into. I probably will take my pen, while I have it here, after I reassemble the knife, is the best time to renumber if your numbers are getting worn off, because now I'm not rubbing it with my fingers and rubbing it off. Now comes, oh, we can put this little rubber stopper back in. So let's put the blade down in here, but put that rubber stopper right there. Now the blade helps hold all these magnets and all these pieces into place. That's why he always suggests take it apart, put it back together with that on. The trick is, do I have this pointed in the right direction? We may have to adjust that. Let's go ahead and get our number one magnet and try to make it sit in that pocket. It is not going to want to sit there at all. You can see it is just not going to cooperate. So I'm going to hold that with my hand while I slide this on top of everything and hope that I got, now I didn't get the right angle on this back bumper guy here. So let's try to move that. I'm twisting that a little bit, just trying to twist that into shape. And now my pocket clip's not cooperating. Okay. Oh, I knocked my bumper out. So you guys may have seen that. This is where it gets tricky, putting this thing back together. Got to get that white bumper nipple side down. I got to point this downwards a little bit more, a little more downwards. I think that's the ticket. I may at this point have to, I've got my top side in, and I think that's working. We're going to find out, but now, there we go. Okay, just all snapped together. Gosh, I don't know. I wasn't even looking through the camera, so I don't know if y'all saw that on the camera. But anyhow, little finagling, little wiggling back and forth. Make sure you're pinching this thing tight every time you turn this around. Let's take that out. Let's make sure the blade comes out. That comes out. If the blade comes out, did I get this magnet wrong? I got this magnet wrong, I think. Let's lock the blade. Nope, because that blade won't lock like that, your number one magnet is wrong. So perhaps I have numbered the wrong side of the magnet. I'm going to take off this pocket clip, because this is obviously a very nice one and I don't want to damage it. So just to make my life a little easier and have fewer parts spinning around, let's go ahead and take that off. Okay, try to clip that here. Let's take it out again. No, when it won't lock into place like that, it's because your number one magnet here is not in the right position. So must have gotten this backwards somehow. Let's put it upside down and try to get it to stay in that pocket. And now I've bumpered out this other side here. So come on. Choo, choo, choo. This is the fun part of dealing with these magnets, y'all. It's this one here has moved out of place. Now, there we go. Got it back into place, finagled it. All right, holding the knife tightly. Let's zoom back out. Go to one. Can you go to one? No. Why can't you just go to one? That's all I want. Now the knife locks. You can see that works and the knife blade is locked. So that tells me I've got all my magnets in the right position. That's how you ultimately know. So let's go ahead and just spin this pivot screw in. That helps hold this end of the knife together. And you can just really twist that. I almost twist this to no tighter than I do with my fingernails. You know, as tight as I can get it with my fingernails, that's typically how tight I keep that pivot, and that's typically all it needs. T8s, I always go in the reverse direction first. Watch that, because this will obviously suck right into that magnet. Now the front is solid. Let's go ahead and put my pocket clip on. So we'll try this first one. Oh, these might be titanium screws. I wonder if these are titanium screws. That would be interesting. I did not know that, but my, no, they must be steel. They're just demagnetized. Make sure you put the long one, the long screw in the back. My bit here on this driver is magnetized, so usually I can do this and it will pick up the screws, but these screws, I can see it wanting to grab just a little bit, but not quite going there. So these are steel screws. Okay, last screw, go a little left until you feel it drop into that thread, and then go. Don't want to over tighten any of these, really. I use my thumb to keep this bit from bouncing around on those magnets. Also check the other side. I notice sometimes that the other side can come loose a little bit. All right, my pocket clip isn't quite in tight. I can feel it jiggling just a little bit, so let's make sure we get that locked down good and tight. While we're at it, let's go ahead and knock this side. Yep, all good there. All right, feeling good. I still don't have my pivot all the way as to how it normally is, so let me see, where did my nickel go? Oh, this is tricky. Gotta find my nickel. Be right back. All right, so how tight do you want your pivot? You don't want any blade play. There's a tiny amount there. You got to kind of also push it back from this side. So, but I've obviously hit it at a different thread entry. I wonder if there's more than one way to thread this in, because the first time the threads were perfectly horizontal to the knife. So let me take it all the way back out till I feel it drop in and tighten it back down again. Again, a nickel is softer than this steel, should not mar up your pivot screw. Nope, still in the same place. Well, what's happened then is this is spun around, that's why. That's okay, but you don't want to over tighten it. So now I'm getting a not a good ting from it. But here's been my experience, is it takes a little while after you break it in to get it to ting. So one of the things you can do is wow, that was already, this is loose. Gosh, I'm wondering if I'm gonna have to, and loosen these up just a hair, just so that they're just barely tight. You may have to end up Loctiting them, although I'd rather not Loctiting, because again, anything you do to change the sound qualities, and I think Loctite almost acts like rubber inside this to reduce the ting. So I'm just gonna have to flip it, but really it's back together for now, and the point of today is to strop this baby up. And let's see, now that I put this 18-degree edge on it, how well it's gonna wanna play. So I just reloaded this strop. So I'm listening to which side scrapes a little more. So that side scrapes a little more, just a little bit more than this side. Now, really, I need to be doing it this way to stay consistent with the grind lines that I ground into it. If you had a good diamond emulsion, somebody's recommended, I just did that stropping video. Several people said Stroppy stuff makes really good diamond emulsion, and it's worth it. So the Stroppy Stuff brand, I have no affiliation. They don't even know I exist, but several of you guys recommended the Stroppy Stuff. So if you're wondering about what kind of stuff to put on your strop, probably that one. And I asked a guy who knew, Aaron, thank you very much, and he said if you only want to get one, you can get the 6 micron. If you want to get 2, get the 4 and 6 micron. You would start with the 6 micron and go down, finish with the 4 micron, which would probably give you more of a polished edge on your blade. All right, let's see how this feels. It definitely feels razor sharp. I mean, that's gonna cut hair. Let's see. Will it cut hair? Yeah, it shaves all day long, right? Look at that. Hairy hand, no more. My wife will be pleased. So definitely shaving sharp. I don't know about hair whittling, and I'm not going to go through the effort of trying to figure that out. What I am going to do is get a piece of paper, and we're going to do a cut test. All right, let's get some paper here, see what we got. Oh, that feels smooth. Holy cow. I mean, that almost feels like it's yelling at the paper, get out of the way, I'm coming through. I mean, that is as laser beam as a laser beam gets right there, y'all. Doesn't matter what direction. Are you kidding me? That thing is, that's got to be probably among the sharpest knife I've ever sharpened. And I've sharpened a few now. And I keep saying that, wow, this knife is as sharp as it comes. Now this thing is ready for some cut testing. Okay, something felt a little loose. Okay, I can see that pivot right there has backed itself all the way out. So, there we go. I just needed to get my pivot really dialed in here. And now the ting is coming back. Now that's not too good. A little bit better. Is my pivot working itself out? I might have to Loctite that pivot. There you go. Just got to give it some juice. And the ting is coming back. And that's been my experience, is that after you take it apart and put it back together, it takes like 20 or 30 flips. And then once you get it kind of dialed back in, it starts singing again. So here we go. There we go. Laser beam achieved. 2 thumbs up. Let's put it on the old cut test and see how that works out, huh?